Cop saves abandoned infant, shocked by truth that emerges years later. The rain hit the ground like 1,000 tiny hammers, loud and cold. The streets were nearly empty, just puddles and shadows. Officer John Harris slowly drove through the quiet neighborhood, wipers working hard against the heavy downpour. He didn't expect much tonight, maybe a noise complaint or a broken tail light, but something about the silence felt heavier than usual. As he turned a corner, a faint sound cut through the rain. He paused, turned down the radio. There it was again, soft, almost like a cat. But then again, no, it wasn't. It was higher. A baby? He put the car in park and stepped out, rain soaking his uniform in seconds. He followed the sound, moving quickly past the broken fence and toward a row of dumpsters. He could hear it clearly now, a baby crying. His heart started pounding. Behind the last dumpster in the shadows, he spotted a small bundle, a thin, soaked blanket wrapped tightly around something that moved. John crouched down and shone his eye flashlight. His breath caught. It was a baby, a tiny, shivering infant with dark skin and wide, terrified eyes. The baby's cries were weak, almost fading. "Oh my God," John whispered, his voice barely louder than the rain. He gently lifted the baby from the wet ground and held it close to his chest. It was freezing. So small. So helpless. His instinct kicked in fast. Protect, warm, call for help. With one hand, he pressed his radio. "Dispatch, I need an ambulance. Found a baby, alive, abandoned, behind the alley on 14th and Monroe. Hurry." He wrapped the baby tighter in the blanket, shielding it from the rain with his own body. "It's okay. I got you now. You're safe," he whispered softly. As he rocked the baby, flashes of memory came flooding in, his own children as babies, long nights spent holding them, the laughter, the messes, the way he used to be someone's hero. That part of his life had drifted away after the divorce. He didn't get to see his kids much anymore. But here, in this moment, something stirred deep inside him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. He looked down at the baby's face. The cries had quieted. The little body began to relax in his arms. This child, this tiny stranger, had just changed everything. The sirens echoed in the distance, growing closer. Still, John didn't want to let go. He didn't know who left this baby here or why, but he knew one thing for sure. He had to make sure this baby survived. When the ambulance pulled up, the paramedics jumped out quickly with a stretcher. One of them, a woman with warm eyes, stepped forward. "You found the baby?" she asked gently. John nodded, reluctant to pass him over. "Behind that dumpster. No one around. I think someone just left him there." She took the baby from John's arms with care. "You probably saved his life tonight." The words hit him hard. He swallowed the lump rising in his throat and watched as they wrapped the baby in a clean blanket and checked his breathing. As the ambulance pulled away, lights flashing through the rain, John stood frozen for a second. The empty space in his arms felt strange, like he had just given up a piece of himself. He got back into his patrol car, dripping wet, but didn't start it right away. He stared out at the rain, thoughts running wild. What would have happened if he hadn't turned that corner? If he hadn't stopped? He closed his eyes and let out a slow breath. Something had changed in him tonight. He didn't just feel like a cop doing his job. He felt like he had a purpose again. After a few minutes, he started the car, but not to return to his patrol route. Instead, he drove straight to the hospital. He had to make sure the baby was okay, and deep down, though he couldn't explain, he knew. This was just the beginning. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and wet floors. Officer John Harris walked in, still damp from the storm. His boots left a faint trail as he moved through the bright hallway, trying to find someone who could tell him about the baby. At the front desk, he showed his badge to a tired-looking nurse. "I brought in a baby, abandoned in the rain. I just..." He paused, unsure of what to say. "I need to know if he's okay." The nurse nodded and typed something into the computer. "You're the officer who found him?" Her voice softened. "He's stable, a little underweight and cold, but otherwise doing well. Would you like to see him?" John nodded, surprised by how quickly the word yes came to him. The nurse led him down a quiet hallway to a small room with soft lighting. The baby lay inside a clear crib, wrapped in fresh blankets. A little knit cap covered his head. His chest rose and fell in a slow, steady rhythm. John stepped closer and just looked at him. The baby's skin had more color now. He looked peaceful, unaware of how close he had come to dying. John didn't say anything for a long time. He just stood there and watched. "He's about 3 months old," the nurse said quietly. "No name, no ID, no reports of a missing infant that match his description." John turned toward her. "So what happens now?" "If no family comes forward, he'll go into foster care." That word, foster, hung in the air like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. Back at the station, John couldn't concentrate. The image of the baby kept flashing in his mind. Alone, cold, crying. And now, in a hospital crib with no one. He sat in the break room, untouched coffee in front of him. Another officer walked in, laughed, said something about a speeding ticket. John didn't hear a word. He was somewhere else. Later that night, he made a phone call. "I want to foster him," he told the nurse, startling even himself as he said it out loud. There was a pause on the other end. That's wonderful, Officer Harris. But you know it's a process, right? It's not immediate." "I understand," he said, and he meant it. "Just tell me what I need to do." What followed were weeks of forms, classes, and long interviews. Social workers came to his home. They looked at everything: his schedule, his finances, his living space, his emotional state. Some were supportive. Some weren't so sure. "You're a single man," one social worker said, eyeing him carefully. "And you've never fostered before. And the baby, he's black." John nodded. "I know. You do realize raising a child of another race means more than just providing a home?" "I do," he said quietly. "That's why I'm willing to learn everything I need to." He wasn't offended. He understood their concerns. He had questions too. Could he give this baby what he needed? Not just love, but identity, understanding, protection in ways John had never had to think about before. But his answer was always the same. "I want to try." And try he did. He started reading. He talked to other officers, black officers, asking about their lives, their childhoods, their experiences with race and belonging. He joined parenting forums. He bought baby gear, some of it wrong at first. He laughed at his mistakes. He cried more than once. And then the call came. He had been approved. The next day, he stood in the hospital hallway again, this time carrying a brand new baby carrier and a carefully folded onesie he had picked out himself. His heart pounded. When the social worker placed the baby in his arms, John nearly stopped breathing. He was heavier now, warmer. The little eyes blinked up at him, curious. "Hello, little man," John whispered. "I think we're going to figure this out together." He had thought long and hard about the name. He wanted something strong, something meaningful. "Your name is Isaiah," he said softly. "It means salvation." The first few weeks were rough. The baby cried every night. John learned the hard way: how to mix formula, how to soothe gas, how to survive on 3 hours of sleep. He paced the floor at 3 a.m. with Isaiah cradled to his chest, humming old songs he barely remembered. There were moments he doubted himself. Moments he felt lost. But every time Isaiah wrapped his tiny fingers around John's thumb, something inside him settled. This wasn't about saving the baby anymore. The baby was saving him. Day by day, they found a rhythm. Isaiah would babble in the mornings when John was getting ready for work. He'd smile when John came home in the evening, legs kicking excitedly. They took walks in the park. They had long, one-sided conversations during diaper changes. John had never expected to become a father again, especially like this. But now he couldn't imagine anything else. He wasn't just raising a child. He was building a life. With him, for him, because of him. And somewhere deep down, he knew this was only the beginning of something much bigger. Isaiah wasn't speaking yet, but John had already memorized the rhythm of his cries. Hungry, wet, tired, scared. He could tell the difference now. Mornings started early, sometimes too early. Isaiah would wake crying before the sun had even touched the window blinds. John would stumble out of bed, hair a mess, shirt inside out, but he never complained. He'd scoop Isaiah into his arms, whispering gently, all right, I got you," and carry him into the kitchen for a bottle, a tea. First, John didn't know what he was doing. He messed up the formula, used the wrong size diapers, accidentally shrank half of Isaiah's baby clothes in the dryer. But little by little, he got better. Fatherhood was like a muscle he hadn't used in a long time, sore at first, but starting to remember. What surprised John the most wasn't the hard stuff. It was how natural it felt to love Isaiah, how deeply he cared, how fiercely protective he became. The bond between them didn't need blood. It was built moment by moment. Bath time, bottle feeding, those quiet naps with Isaiah sleeping on his chest. But one thing kept tugging at him. Isaiah would grow up in a world that would see him differently than it saw John. John couldn't ignore it. Couldn't pretend love would protect Isaiah from everything. He needed to prepare him, not just with hugs and lullabies, but with pride, understanding, and identity. So John began to learn, really learn. He borrowed books on Black history from the library and read them late at night while Isaiah slept. He followed parenting blogs by Black families. He asked his fellow officers, Black men and women, what their childhoods were like, what they wished their own parents had done differently. Some were surprised. Others were grateful he even asked. He signed Isaiah up for a daycare known for its diversity, run by warm, thoughtful teachers who embraced every child's culture. When Isaiah was old enough, John took him to community festivals, Juneteenth. Events and story hours at the library focused on African heritage. John wasn't trying to overcompensate. He just wanted Isaiah to grow up knowing who he was and being proud of it. Sometimes John felt awkward, out of place, like he didn't quite belong in the spaces he brought Isaiah into. But he pushed through the discomfort. Because this wasn't about him. It was about Isaiah. By the time Isaiah was 4, he was talking nonstop. About dinosaurs, trucks, the moon. And one morning at breakfast, out of nowhere, he asked, "Daddy, why am I brown and you're not?" John set down his coffee slowly. He had known this question would come one day. He just hadn't expected it so soon. "Well," John said, pulling Isaiah gently into his lap, "people come in all kinds of colors, like crayons in a box. And your skin? It's beautiful. It's strong. It's part of who you are." Isaiah looked at his arm, then at John's. "But we don't match." John smiled. "No, we don't. But families don't always have to match. We're a team, right?" Isaiah nodded, still thinking. "So I'm your team?" "You're my everything," John said softly, kissing the top of his head. As Isaiah grew older, he started asking deeper questions. Where was his real mom? Why? Didn't she keep him? Did he have other family somewhere? John didn't lie, but he also didn't tell the whole truth yet. He wasn't ready. Isaiah wasn't ready. So he told him what he could, honestly. Your birth mom loved you very much. She couldn't take care of you, but she made sure you were safe. And now I get to love you too. And Isaiah accepted that. For now. They had their routines. Saturday morning pancakes, movie nights on Fridays. Isaiah liked to stay up late and ask questions about the stars. John, exhausted, would lie on the couch listening to him ramble on about space and life and what he wanted to be when he grew up. Maybe a teacher, or a scientist, or a superhero. You're already one to me, John would say with a grin. The first time Isaiah called, him Dad instead of Daddy, John didn't even notice right away. It was during a grocery run. Isaiah pointed to something on a shelf and said, "Hey, Dad, can we get that?" John paused. The word hit him like a warm wave. Dad, simple, easy, natural, like it had always belonged to him. John looked down at Isaiah, smiling. "Sure, buddy, let's get it." Back at home, he stood in the kitchen unpacking groceries, the words still echoing in his head. Dad. He wasn't just playing a role anymore. He was Isaiah's father in every way that mattered. And he realized, then, no matter how much he'd prepared, no matter how much he'd read or asked or studied, nothing could truly prepare someone for how much you could love a child that wasn't born to you. It was the kind of love that changed you, quietly, completely and forever, and deep inside John knew. This wasn't the peak of the journey, it was only the beginning of the next chapter. By the time Isaiah turned 13, the boy who once clung to John's hand was now starting to pull away. Just a little, just enough to remind John that childhood doesn't last forever. He was taller now. His voice had started to drop. He had strong opinions about music, socks, and what counted as cool. But at the end of the day, he still crawled onto the couch beside John during movie nights, still leaned on him when things got too loud or too hard. John had always known that one day Isaiah would start asking harder questions. But what he didn't expect was that the answers might come looking for them first. It started with a man outside the police station. It was a regular Tuesday afternoon. John had just finished his shift and was heading out the front doors, stretching his back and thinking about what to cook for dinner. That's when he saw the man, mid-30s, hoodie pulled up, standing awkwardly by the bench near the parking lot. He looked nervous, glancing around like he wasn't sure he should be there. John gave him a polite nod as he passed, but the man stepped forward. "Officer Harris?" John stopped. "Yeah?" The man looked over his shoulder before speaking, voice low. I'm Leroy. I need to talk to you about Isaiah." At the mention of his son's name, something in John's body tightened. "What about him?" he asked, trying to stay calm. The man stepped closer, too close. "That night you found him, it wasn't just a random drop-off. There's more to the story. More than you know." John's pulse jumped. "Who are you? How do you know about that night?" But before John could ask more, the man backed away, shaking his head. "I've already said too much. Just be careful. The past has a way of catching up." And with that, he disappeared into the crowd across the street. John stood there frozen, the weight of those words sinking into his chest. Be careful. The past has a way of catching up. That night, while Isaiah was in the kitchen making microwave popcorn and singing badly to a rap song, John sat at the kitchen table, mind racing. Leroy's face, his words, the strange fear in his voice. It all felt like something important, something unfinished. John had always assumed the woman who left. Isaiah did so because she was young, scared, or struggling. He hadn't imagined something darker, something dangerous. After Isaiah went to bed, John pulled out an old cardboard box from the hall closet. Inside were reports from that night. His notes, the photos, the hospital forms. He hadn't looked at them in years. He spent the rest of the evening flipping through files, rereading every detail, hoping for a clue. And found nothing new, but that wasn't enough anymore. So the next day, John visited the station archives, a quiet room lined with dusty cabinets and computer terminals. He typed in the date Isaiah was found, then the neighborhood, then missing persons, abandoned child, unidentified woman. Nothing matched directly. But John wasn't a rookie. He knew how to read between the lines. He searched old case files from neighboring precincts, cross-referenced gang-related reports, checked for drug raids, trafficking rings, anything involving young women. That's when something stood out. A brief, half-buried mention in a 2-page summary from the next county over. A young woman, unidentified, found dead in an alley just a few days after Isaiah had been rescued. The description stopped John cold. Late teens, medium build, black, no ID, no personal belongings. Cause of death, undetermined. No one had come forward. No family, no missing persons. Report to match. She had been quietly filed away as another unknown tragedy, but John couldn't ignore the timeline. He reached out to an old colleague from his early days on the force, Mike. They met at a quiet diner off the freeway, away from the noise. John laid it all out, everything Leroy had said, the files he'd found, his gut feeling that something bigger was buried beneath it all. Mike listened carefully, then sighed. Yeah. I remember that time, he said. Things were messy. There were trafficking rings operating under the radar. A few we never fully shut down. One girl escaped. She was pregnant. We tried to protect her, but she vanished before she had the baby. John sat back, stunned. You think that could have been Isaiah's mom? Mike didn't answer, just looked at him with tired eyes. It's possible. John felt the room tilt slightly. He drove home in silence that night, knuckles tight on the steering wheel. He walked into the house and found Isaiah asleep on the couch, textbook open on his chest, TV still on. John sat down across from him and stared at his son's face. So much love. So much history. So many things he still hadn't told him. He gently turned off the TV, pulled the blanket over Isaiah, and sat there in the quiet, thinking. He had uncovered a piece of the truth. A terrible, heartbreaking piece. And now, he faced a question heavier than any he'd ever had to answer. Was Isaiah ready to know? And if he wasn't, was John strong enough to carry this secret a little longer, until he was? John never intended to keep secrets. He just wanted to protect Isaiah from pain, from questions without answers, from the weight of a story he was still trying to fully understand himself. He told himself he was waiting for the right time, that Isaiah needed to be older, that maybe, just maybe, the past could stay buried a little longer. But secrets don't stay quiet forever, and sometimes, the moment you fear the most doesn't knock. It crashes through your front door, loud, and sudden and impossible to take back. It was a Thursday evening. The house smelled like pasta, Isaiah's favorite. John had even picked up his favorite garlic bread from the small Italian shop down the street. He was trying to make the evening light and easy. Lately, things between them had felt off. Isaiah was quieter, a little distant, more locked in, his own head. John thought maybe it was just teenage stuff, maybe school stress, maybe just a phase. He had no idea the weight Isaiah was already carrying, and what was about to be added. John was on the phone in the living room, talking to Sarah, his colleague and close friend from the department. She was the only one who knew everything about Isaiah's background. I don't know how to bring it up, he said, voice low. I've been going through old files, piecing together more about his birth mother. The situation, it's darker than I thought. She died trying to protect him. She was caught in something terrible. Sarah's voice came through gently. He deserves to know the truth, John. I know, he whispered. But how do I tell a kid that his mother was hunted, that she died alone in an alley because it was the only way to keep him safe? The kitchen. There was a sudden loud crash. John's heart jumped. Hold on, he told Sarah, and walked into the hallway. There, standing frozen in the doorway, was Isaiah. A broken glass on the floor beside his feet, his hands shaking. His face was pale. His lips slightly parted. He had heard everything. I was just coming for a drink, Isaiah said, his voice small. I didn't mean to listen. But then I couldn't move. John took a step forward. Isaiah! But Isaiah stepped back, eyes wide. You knew? He said. You've known all this time. About her? John opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He had spent months imagining how he would tell Isaiah, slowly, gently, with time for questions, space for tears. Now he stood there with no plan, no protection. I was going to tell you, John finally said. I was just trying to figure out the right way. Isaiah shook his head slowly. There's no right way. You just say it. You tell the truth. And then he was gone. Out the door, into the night, the slam echoing through the hallway, like a gunshot. John stood there, hands trembling, the glass still on the floor. He called Isaiah's phone. Straight to voicemail, he texted. Nothing. He got in the car and drove, around the neighborhood, past the basketball courts, by the convenience store Isaiah sometimes stopped at with friends. Nothing. Finally, just before midnight, he found him. Sitting. Alone at the park on the old swing they used to visit when Isaiah was little. Head down, shoulders hunched. Hurt pouring off him like steam. John parked and walked over slowly, like approaching a deer you don't want to scare. Isaiah, he said softly. Isaiah didn't look at him. Why didn't you tell me? John sat on the swing next to him. The chains creaked under his weight. I was scared, he admitted. Scared of hurting you? Scared of changing how you saw yourself. And maybe, scared of losing you. You lied to me, Isaiah said, voice flat. You always said we didn't keep secrets. I didn't lie, John said. I just kept something too long, and that was wrong. I know that now. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound the wind rustling through the trees and the faint hum of passing cars. Finally, Isaiah spoke again. Was she a bad person? John turned to him, heart aching. No, she was brave. So brave. She got out of something terrible. She tried to protect you with everything she had. She gave you up because she knew it was the only way you'd survive. Isaiah's voice cracked. She died? Alone? John didn't sugarcoat it. Yes, but she died fighting for you. You weren't abandoned, Isaiah. You were saved. Isaiah finally looked at him, eyes full of confusion, pain, and something softer underneath. Understanding trying to break through the storm. I don't know who I am anymore, he whispered. Everything feels like a lie. John reached out, not touching him, just letting his hand hang there. You're still you. You're still the boy who built rocket ships out of cereal boxes, who sings terribly in the shower, who calls me Dad even when he's mad. Isaiah let out a shaky laugh, just a flicker. You're still my son, John added quietly. Always. Isaiah looked away again. I need time. John nodded. Take all the time you need. I'll be here, no matter what. They sat together under the dark sky. Two figures on old swings, not quite boy and man. Not quite father and child, but something in between. A family, trying to hold on through the storm. Neither of them said anything else that night. But the silence between them was no longer empty. It was heavy, real, wounded, and healing, just beginning to take shape. The days that followed felt heavy. Isaiah didn't come home that night or the night after. John sat at the kitchen table until dawn, the food he'd made for dinner still untouched, the garlic bread now cold and hard. He kept checking the door, listening for footsteps, a knock, a text, anything. Finally, just after 11 p.m., on the third night, a message came. Staying at Michael's for a few days. I'm fine. Just need space. John stared at the screen, the message short and flat. It wasn't angry, but it wasn't warm either. He typed a reply, deleted it, then typed another. Take the time you need. I love you. I'm here when you're ready. He didn't hear back. Each morning, John still made 2 cups of coffee out of habit, one for himself, one for Isaiah. Then he'd remember and pour the second one down the drain. The house felt too quiet. The couch where Isaiah usually sat, knees up and headphones in, looked like a stranger's furniture. John didn't know how to fill the silence, so he gave Isaiah what he'd asked for: time. But even time can feel sharp when it's mixed with guilt. He found himself looking at old photos again. Isaiah in his Halloween costume as a dinosaur, age 4. Holding a sparkler at the 4th of July parade, missing a front tooth. Sleeping in John's lap after a long road trip, his tiny fingers still clutching a juice box. So much love had been poured into this child, and now John was afraid he'd broken something that couldn't be fixed. He didn't try to chase Isaiah down. He didn't bombard him with calls or guilt. He simply let Isaiah know, through quiet, consistent messages, that he was still his dad, still home. Weeks passed. Occasionally, Isaiah would come home to grab fresh clothes or books. Those visits were short. He didn't talk much. He barely looked John in the eye. But he came, and that was something. One night, John overheard him on the phone in the next room. I just don't know who I am anymore, Isaiah said quietly. Everything I thought I knew about myself, it feels fake now, like I was built on a lie. John stood on the other side of the wall, hand resting gently on the frame, his heart aching. He wanted to go in, hold his son, promise him everything would be okay. But he didn't. Isaiah needed to say those things out loud, and John needed to respect that. Things came to a head a few days later. It was a Sunday. John had made Isaiah's favorite dinner again, chicken tenders with mashed potatoes and too much ketchup. Isaiah sat at the table, arms crossed, barely touching his plate. The silence between them was thick until, suddenly, Isaiah spoke. How can you understand what I'm going through? He said, eyes sharp. You're not black. You didn't lose your mother. You didn't grow up not knowing where you came from. John didn't flinch. You're right, he said gently. I can't fully understand, but I'm trying. Isaiah looked up, his voice rising. Trying isn't enough. You kept it from me. You decided I wasn't ready, but you didn't ask. Me? I made a mistake, John said. A big one. I thought I was protecting you. I see now that I was protecting myself. There was a pause. Then Isaiah pushed back from the table, standing up so fast the chair nearly tipped. I don't need your protection, he said, voice trembling. I need the truth. I need to know who I am. And with that, he left again. This time, John didn't cry. He just sat at the table staring at the plate of untouched food. He stayed there for hours until the sun dipped below the trees outside the kitchen window. The next day, John got a call from Isaiah's school guidance counselor, Mrs. Thompson. She spoke gently. Isaiah's been off lately. Quiet. His grades are slipping. He's not himself. John listened, nodding silently, shame curling deep in his stomach. I know it's complicated, she said. But he's lucky to have a father who cares this much. Just don't give up on him. A few weeks later, just after sunset, John pulled into the driveway and saw someone sitting on the front steps. Isaiah. Head down, hoodie pulled over his hair, a backpack by his feet. John stepped out of the car slowly, not wanting to break the moment. The last light of the day was fading behind the trees, painting everything in soft gold and shadow. Isaiah looked up as he approached. His eyes were tired, not angry, just heavy, like someone who hadn't slept in a while but had done a lot of thinking. "Hey," he said. John gave a small nod. "Hey." A pause stretched between them. Then Isaiah motioned to the steps. "Can we talk?" John sat down beside him, just far enough to give him space but close enough to be there if he needed it. "I've been figuring things out," Isaiah said quietly. "About everything." John waited, silent. "I'm still mad," Isaiah admitted. "Still confused, still sad too." "You have every right to be," John said softly. Isaiah glanced at him, eyes sharp but open. "But I also know you love me. You've always been there even when I made it hard." John swallowed the lump in his throat. "There's nothing you could do that would make me stop being your dad." Isaiah looked away for a moment, blinking quickly. Then he reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a small photograph. It was wrinkled, folded twice over. He handed it to John. A young woman stared up from the image. Big eyes, full lips, tired smile. "I found her name," Isaiah said. "Tanya." John's breath caught. "She was just a teenager," Isaiah whispered. "She didn't run away from me. She ran to save me." John felt tears rising, but he kept his voice steady. "She was brave, Isaiah. She gave you everything she had." They sat in silence for a while, the photo between them. "I want to do something," Isaiah said suddenly. "Something that honors her. I don't want her to just be a story that ends in pain. I want her to mean something." John nodded. "What do you have in mind?" Isaiah's voice gained strength. "There are kids out there like her, scared, alone, falling through the cracks. What if we helped them? Set up a program or something, a mentorship group, for kids who feel like they don't have anyone." John looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw not just a boy growing into a man, but a soul trying to turn pain into purpose. "That's a beautiful idea," John said, his voice thick. "We could talk to the community center, see about funding, start small. And maybe a scholarship," Isaiah added. "In her name, for girls who want to escape bad situations and start over." John smiled. "Tanya's light. What do you think?" Isaiah smiled too. "Yeah, I like that." They sat there as the night grew darker, the porch light casting a gentle glow on their faces. Eventually, they went inside. The air felt warmer. The silence was different now, not tense but comfortable. Familiar. That night, as Isaiah unpacked his bag, John made hot chocolate, just like he used to when Isaiah was younger. "2 marshmallows, right?" he called, from the kitchen. "4," Isaiah called back, laughing. As they sat in the living room, mugs in hand, John asked, "You ready to come home for good?" Isaiah nodded. "Yeah, I think I am." The days that followed were filled with planning. Meetings with local organizations, long conversations over dinner. Isaiah drafted ideas for the mentorship group, while John helped navigate logistics. They reached out to other parents, counselors, even police departments willing to support youth programs. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks, budgets to fight for, doors that didn't open, but they kept going. Working together didn't just rebuild their bond, it made it stronger. Isaiah had questions still, about race, about identity, about where he truly belonged. John didn't always have the answers, But he listened. He stayed. And slowly, Isaiah found his own voice. By senior year, Isaiah was thriving. His grades were back up. He gave talks at the youth center. He helped younger kids with homework, told them about Tanya's story, not in sadness, but in strength. And then, just like that, it was graduation day. John sat in the crowd, heart pounding, watching Isaiah walk across the stage in his cap and gown. The name Isaiah Harris rang out through the gym. The applause echoed. John blinked back tears. So many memories came rushing in. The rainy night, the hospital crib, the first laugh, the first word, the first time Isaiah called him Dad, and now here he was, grown, steady, beautifully, his own. After the ceremony, John pushed through the crowd to find him. Isaiah saw him, face breaking into a wide grin. Dad! He ran over and hugged him, tight and long. No words were needed. Everything was in that embrace. When they pulled apart, Isaiah looked serious. I used to think family was about who you're born to, he said. But it's not. It's about who stays, who chooses you. John's voice trembled. And I'll choose you, Isaiah. Always. Isaiah's eyes shone. I choose you too. Later that night, as they sat under the stars in their backyard, father and son, partners in pain and healing, Isaiah turned to John. You know, he said, I'm thinking about becoming a social worker, or maybe a teacher, something where I can keep helping. John nodded. Whatever you choose, you're going to change lives, Isaiah smiled. Like you changed mine? John laughed softly. No, son, you changed mine. They sat quietly for a long while watching the night sky. And for the first time in years, there were no shadows left between them. Only light. The light of truth. The light of love. The light of Tanya's legacy, now carried forward through the heart of her son. The boy who had once been found in the rain was now the one bringing hope to others. And his story was just beginning.